It is time. Welcome to today's masterclass on architecting a global support organization brought to you by CCW Digital and Language IO. I'm Brian Cantor, Principal Analyst for CCW, and your host for today's discussion. Whenever we talk about growth and expansion, we always discuss the impact on brand reputation and customer experience quality. To put it simply, can you be as customer-centric, as human-centric, as personalized in a big sea as you were in a smaller pond? And as you venture into new markets and you start to interact with new customers, can you be that same reliable, trusted source of human connection, that same source of valuable support, and not just yet another merchant? Sadly, right now, there's very much reason to doubt whether the audience can answer yes to that question. We know that only 16% of customers currently feel that their experience is personalized. The majority do not feel that the agents with whom they speak actually understand them. Many continue to say that experiences are inconvenient, that they require too much effort, and they really have to ultimately accommodate you as an organization as opposed to you accommodating them as a customer. And when we think about what they're looking for and what they value, especially in an era of so much AI, desire to speak to someone who understands them is one of the main reasons why a customer will bypass self-service and go right to speak to a live agent. It's also, unfortunately, one of the reasons why right now, only 17% of customers actually trust the self-service experiences they're having. So as you put all this together, there's one abundantly clear takeaway. We have to start to think about serving customers on their terms. And when we think about that, it has to be more than just being available at all times in different channels. It's really about communicating in their preferred language. It's about committing to maximizing understanding while minimizing frustration and effort and inconvenience. But right now, with 94% of organizations facing efficiency directives going into 2025, there's an important question on the table. How can we actually accommodate this higher standard for translation and language preference across more channels than ever while doing so at scale? And how can we do it in an age of AI where we're not only seeing an impact on automation as it relates to how we interact with customers, but also the way we build our support teams? Because remember, we're going to be asking agents to take on a more consultative, complex role. So as we do so, do we have to sacrifice language capability to prioritize some of those other soft skills? Do we have to sacrifice some of those soft skills to prioritize language? Or is there a way to succeed on all fronts? Well, as a spoiler alert for today's masterclass, there absolutely is a way to succeed on all fronts. And that's exactly what we're going to be covering. Now, as a reminder, this isn't just another webinar. This is an action-oriented masterclass where you're going to receive a certificate indicating your participation in today's discussion. That should pop up for download at the end of today's masterclass. You'll see it on your screen. But if for some reason it doesn't pop up for you, don't worry. We'll make sure to get you your certificate afterwards to signify that you've taken part in this journey to build that global support organization. We're also going to have a pop-up for you to register for a personalized demo with the Language IO team to really see what you can do as far as scaling language capability and making understanding of all your customers a reality in 2025 and beyond. And of course, one final reminder here, we want you to make the most of your session. So make sure to ask questions using the console on your screen and participate in the chat throughout the discussion. Without further ado, I want to pass it over to Sheridan to learn a little bit more about her role, Ted's role as a fellow speaker, and also what Language IO does and why this topic is of such passion to them.
Thank you so much, Brian. We're really excited, and thank you all for attending. We're going to be talking specifically about leveraging AI to create really localized and native experiences, but we're also going to talk a little bit about things that you may want to consider when looking at other AI solutions like security and accuracy. So quite a bit of content. But if you don't know Language IO, we are the most secure AI-powered platform in the language translation space. And one of the things that we really care about is making sure it is a secure and business accurate experience for you and for your customers. So that's what we do. And some of the customers that we serve are across all verticals, around the globe, all sizes. And we're really excited to share some of the lessons we've learned with working with so many of these brand forward companies. Anything that you'd want to add, Brian?
That's really important here is understanding that when you look at this list of companies, the different industries that are represented, the different nuances that are required, it's very easy in today's world to provide a generic level of support, answer basic questions. But in an era of self-service, customers have options for that. They don't necessarily need to get in touch with your team to know basic policies or how to log into their account or how to reset their password. When they're connecting with you, increasingly it's because they want to know how you can help them navigate through a very specific, very complex, very personalized issue. And when you think of specificity, when you think of nuance, understanding is more important than ever. So if you not only understand the basics of interacting with customers, but the basics of interacting with your customers and their challenges in your industry, then you're not going to be able to make those connections. So I think, to be honest, of all the stuff that you do really well, this to me is a real good snapshot of why we should take what you have to say seriously, because you're really bringing up, I think, that cross-industry relevance and all the specificity that's going to be so important.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, so I wanted to give you all a kind of structure of this masterclass. And I went to business school, so I love a good case study and use case to start to wrap our heads around, the different steps that you can take in learning from some of the best in the business. So the first thing we'll start with is, why are we even thinking multilingual? And then we'll get into some of those use cases that we've seen people really excel at and how you could kind of start doing that. Some considerations for success, what you'll need to be thinking about, and how you're going to evaluate your program as you get started. And then we're going to give you some things that you could do today to get started. And then we'd love your questions. We do have the chat open. So if you find that something we're saying really resonates with you, or that you want to add to, or just, say, yes, that's a great idea. So feel free to use the chat. We love it when you engage. So no problems. And we'll also have Q&A at the end, so you can ask more formal questions. I'm Sheridan Orr, and I am the Chief Marketing Officer at Language.io. And I'm so excited that actually Brian is not just going to be an MC for this, but he's going to share a lot of the data that his team has researched and findings from you all. But we also have Ted Trainer, who is the VP of Strategic Accounts at Language.io. And you may say, oh, is he going to sell to me? And I would say, no, he is not going to sell to you. Why Ted is so valuable in this conversation is he gets to work with a lot of these clients really hands-on and understand their objectives and what they're trying to achieve. And so we're just going to do a deep dive into what he's learned and how we've engaged with those clients as we move forward. Ted, say hello.
Hello, everyone. Yeah, I'm excited to talk about the various use cases that can sort of highlight the important point.
That's amazing.
Showcasing today.
Perfect. So, Brian, I think we have a poll. So we're going to break the ice and hear from our attendees.
Yeah. So again, the premise of a masterclass is for this to be actionable. And so today, to be able to take action, we have to understand what you're trying to achieve and what challenges you're facing. And so for this poll question, we're asking, what are the biggest challenges to serving customers in their native language today? So you can see a variety of different options here. We'll give you a few moments to check any that apply to you. And obviously, as Sheridan mentioned, if we totally drop the ball here and none of these do apply to your circumstance, feel free to put those in the chat or the Q&A box, and we'll be sure to address those during the discussion as well. So waiting for some of those questions to come in. And yeah, I think, really what this ultimately, I think what's fascinating here, Sheridan, as we kind of go through these answers, kind of looking at it both from the perspective of, different languages, different team dynamics, and different skills, because they're all going to be very valuable as we look at what it takes to connect with customers. Ultimately, anyone can focus on, okay, here's where, let's just translate this one thing, it's going to be all magical, but we know needs are evolving. We know teams are evolving. And so I think this poll really looks at some of the nuance that's associated with that. And so seeing people being a little shy with putting their responses in, but, definitely don't be shy here. We want this to be personalized to you. So the more you can share, the better we're going to be. We will forward to the results here. So these are starting to populate. This should continue to update as results come in. But right now, we definitely see the one that's leading the way is ensuring that multilingual candidates also have the other necessary skills. Now, Sheridan, Ted, I don't know if you have anything you want to share as far as how that resonates with what you're seeing with the different organizations you work with.
Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, no, it really does resonate, right? Because there's the the aspect of trying to cover certain markets from a language perspective. And yes, you can just go out and find, in some markets it's easier than others. You can go out and find native speakers. But do those native speakers have the subject matter expertise to answer the questions or help customers and guide them on whatever situations they're in or support they need? And what we found through through our technology, for example, is that customers will actually get better served by having a translation tool in the space that can allow the true subject matter expert to support that customer no matter what language they speak, right? So your subject matter expert on your product or on service, or to whatever it is that your organization is delivering, maybe they're a French speaker and they're the one that's most appropriate to answer the question from somebody speaking, Italian. It doesn't have to be that agent that's assigned in that particular market.
I love that. So honestly, we see all of these problems and challenges in supporting customers in their native language. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can start to address those and some easy ways that you can start to combat them. So without further ado, we're going to get into the content. So really, there are 4 reasons that companies really embark on this journey of having multilingual customer support. And the first is that they want to increase loyalty and satisfaction with their existing customers. And Brian's going to share some amazing data about that specific use case as we move through the presentation. But you can also acquire new customers, expand to new markets, expand to new product lines in different locations, with making sure that you have language support available for those new products in new markets. Increased efficiency and cost savings. We're going to talk quite a bit about this because I think many of us are looking at the macroeconomic situation and starting to make sure that we have plans to really save money where we can. And then lastly, what you're going to build through all of this is going to architect you in a way that you're going to have flexibility built into your system and scalability. So as you decide maybe you want to add another market later on, then you've already got all the infrastructure and your workflows, et cetera. So you can continue to build on your success. And as we talk through some of the customer stories that we would like you to learn from, you can see how maybe they started with 5 languages and a specific use case, and then really their engagement blossomed with their international customers. So those are the 4 use cases that we're going to talk about and how you can make sure that you're really building to any of those. So Brian, anything fun that you want to say about increasing satisfaction and loyalty with existing customers?
Yeah, so one of the really important things here, and it's, first of all, I want to just remark how fast time flies, because when I started with CCW, we were talking about the contact center of 2015, and then we were doing stuff on 2020 and then 2025. And most recently, we did research on the contact center of 2030. And actually 85% of organizations said that they're going to believe that the ability to serve customers in their natural language will become a high priority customer demand in the next 5 years. Now, 85%, that already should have you understanding the stakes here. But to go one step further, that means it actually outranked things like increasing personalization and reducing effort. Now, if you've been on any customer contact webinar, read any white paper, talked to any customer, you know how important things like reducing effort and increasing personalization are. And yet right now, the market is showing that they're seeing the ability to serve customers in their natural language as an even bigger priority, which again speaks to the potential ways you can build customer relationships and grow your business by being able to truly understand and accommodate their language. Now, just that there is an upside, there also is a downside to not acting. So one of the things that we found from our research actually is that 71% of organizations said they're okay right channeling customers based if their language capabilities require it. So let's say, for example, you don't feel confident serving someone in their natural language via email. You feel okay saying, sorry, we can't help you via email. You have to move to this other channel. Now, while that makes sense, like obviously you don't want to serve a customer if you can't even talk to them. The challenge with that is right now only 22% of customers are happy with their ability to decide where the interaction takes place. So right now, 4 in 5 customers dislike how brands are approaching channel offerings. And yet the majority of organizations say that they have no choice because they don't have language capabilities across the board. So you can see ultimately why you have a dilemma here where if you want to impress customers, you want to accommodate them, you want to be truly omni-channel in today's world, you can't let language be a barrier. You have to ensure that you are able to accommodate them wherever they want to interact. And then when you do so, echoing what Sheridan said, that's where you start to see increases in market size, increases in customer loyalty, increases in efficiency, and ultimately a better overall experience.
That's excellent. So Ted, can you tell us a little bit about how Shutterstock embarked on their multilingual journey?
So the good news is that all these case studies that we're going to show today, they take exactly what Brian said. They recognize that they need to be where their customers are and be available to support and have those channels available in the languages that their customers speak. So Shutterstock is a perfect example. They realized early on, right, they need to have their knowledge-based content, their help content available in other languages other than English. Their problem was the simplicity of the service, or the simplicity of getting that content translated. And so this is also going to be a key component. How easy can we make it for customers to provide those multilingual channels of support to match their core language market? With Shutterstock, they had been attempting to do translation of help content on their website, but they had been doing it in a way that was very, very manual, very risk prone, copy paste, formatting problems, et cetera. And what that led to was an inability to get that content out to the market fast enough. It also then sort of discouraged them from going beyond maybe a handful of the top priority markets because they were spending so much time and effort to do that. With technology like Language.io, they were able to come in and automatically connect into the Salesforce hosted articles and allow for translation pretty seamlessly, very quickly. So started out with a handful of languages. They've grown to beyond 20 languages now. And they've now moved into turning on channels within Salesforce Case so they can communicate with their customers over email, regardless of the language that they're asking. Both their customers and their providers of the photography that they sell.
I love that, Ted, because that is one of the things that we know and love about Shutterstock is they have a two-sided marketplace. They have the creators that may be creating digital content all over the globe, and then also the consumers of those images. And so it's really important that they can bridge that gap. And I think one of the big lessons that we've often talked about is if you are new to your multilingual journey, a great place to start is with your knowledge base. It's easy. Often you have policies that are unique to those specific markets, and it can really be a foundation for all of your content going forward. So that's our first takeaway. Go ahead, Ted.
Yeah, the other thing that's really important about looking at your knowledge-based content as a foundation is that especially if you're looking at, in the near term or maybe next year, deploying a bot of any kind, right? Bots in the support space rely on the knowledge-based content to deliver an accurate answer, whether it be in an agent assist or whether it be directly to a customer. And if you don't have a solid foundation in the knowledge base in all languages, then you could be setting yourself up for some risk and some trouble. So
yeah, Ted, I think that's such an important point because oftentimes, and I have some stats here you see in the slides that talk about the agent experience, and we often talk about knowledge management as an agent-facing concern. But the reality is that in an era of self-service, knowledge management has dramatic ramifications for the customer because the customer is going to be interacting with your bot, with your FAQ page, with your self-service portal, and their only knowledge about your business is what gets pumped out to them. They don't have 5 years of experience answering support tickets and kind of learning what knowledge isn't translated correctly or what little loopholes they can do to figure stuff out. They only know what's being put in front of them. And so if your knowledge is not clear to them, if it's not in their language, if it's not articulate, if it's not accurate, then they're going to get the wrong information. They're going to have a bad experience. So as we see more emphasis on self-service, the need for high quality, accurate, consistent, intelligible knowledge becomes more important than ever. Now, of course, it's also important on the agent experience side as well. In fact, right now, 74% of contact center leaders say that translation capability is a pivotal part of the agent experience. And we know that we've always known happy agents equal happy customers. We've always known you want to have really empowered and engaged agents. But to be honest, I'm going to challenge that slightly. When an agent was answering basic questions about, oh, how do I reset my password, or when is my payment due? You know, like, they don't have to be that happy to answer that question accurately. But when you're looking for them to engage in more complex conversations with customers where they really have to hear them out and empathize and connect with them, their mindset, their frustration level, their sentiment is more important than ever. And if they're struggling because they can't interpret what's in the knowledge base, they can't hear the customer properly, they're not going to be in best position to perform. And so translation, if you want to empower agents to be productive, engaged, and great ambassadors for your brand, that's going to be a huge priority as well, which is why, as you see here, more than 2/3 of organizations call translation a key AI focus as well. So certainly a lot of organizations want to follow in Shutterstock's footsteps here and move in the right direction.
I love that. So that's our build customer loyalty and increase satisfaction. So how can you start today with that? The first thing you want to do is really know your customers, and you want to understand, like, how many calls are you getting in different languages, and then you need to start comparing those metrics. So look at your cohorts. Do you have any big gaps that you want to really increase that satisfaction or that loyalty, or even sometimes wallet share? So know which customers you're trying to serve. Are there any gaps in your customer experience based on language? Start to compare metrics across cohorts, and then listen to your agents, because, and I will build on this later on, but definitely understand what your agents are experiencing when they have a call that is not in their language, and that they're trying to navigate that, because what you will often find is they're trying to solve that problem on their own by putting in things into Google Translate outside of your systems. And we'll talk about some of the risk of that later on. But after that, you want to identify those key inflection points and engagement points, which is Shutterstock started where they did because they felt their knowledge base was that first step in that plan. And they started small with a couple of languages and then expanded. So this is kind of how you can get started. And these are foundational pieces for everything that we're going to build on. Know your customers, start to understand those language groupings and the impact that they may have on your customer satisfaction, and listen to your agents. So now we're going to talk a little bit of, so you've made your customers happy and you have skyrocketing CSAT, but now you want to expand into new markets, increase sales, maybe take products to new markets. And we can really help you with that as well. 72% of customers are more likely to purchase if they can get their information in their native language. And 40% of global customers wouldn't buy from a company that they don't feel that can support them. So as you're thinking about new market entry, these are really important things to think about. And then, Brian, you always have amazing data. Anything you want to add here?
Yeah, so one of the key things that, right now, about 94% of contact centers, as I think I alluded to earlier, are facing efficiency pressure going into 2025. But the good news is that this is not all cut costs or do more with less. A lot of it is actually do more for less. And so ultimately the idea is they want to have responsible growth, and they want to make sure that as they grow, they're not creating undue risk. They're not risking losing their way as a brand. They're not risking damaging their existing customer relationships. And so ultimately, therefore, that's going to be really key. Now, another key thing is, as they look ahead, 76% of contact center leaders say that it is imperative to adapt their strategy to a changing customer base, which means that what works for you today, the languages you speak, the channels you serve, the policies that you enforce, the typical contact center leader acknowledges that may not work for tomorrow's customers. And so a key part of growing responsibly and generating more revenue and increasing lifetime value is recognizing we have to adapt. We have to honor who customers are, and we have to be who they need us to be, not who we wish they would take and tolerate. And so translation plays a huge role in that, and really being able to reach customers in new markets, reach new demographics, and just elevate relationships from someone you buy from to someone you trust and believe in.
I love that. And I can't wait for you all to hear this story from Ted. Sky is one of the best in the business at understanding how to expand into new markets and what they need to do that. So, Ted, would you mind sharing this story with our
Sure.
audience?
So yes, thank you, Sheridan. So Showmax is one of Sky's global brands. Showmax is a leading streaming service in Africa. It spans, I think, 40 plus markets across the African continent. And they've been around for about a decade. But recently, Sky has gone on an initiative to to win more subscribers, to expand market share within the African continent. And take away share from Netflix, which was the previous leader. And as part of that plan, they did just what you were talking about, Brian. Right? They looked at the market, who their customers were, and they adapted their approach to customer engagement and customer support to ensure that they're covering as many languages, local languages, as possible. The Showmax brand, just maybe a bit of background. The Showmax streaming platform is a unique combination of locally produced African content, as well as sort of more international, scripted series, popular movies. There's a lot of children's programming and even some sports, international sports. So they're bringing in a global platform of content and a local platform of content to a very specific African market. So in order to do that, they looked at using technology to cover these languages. They had agents that were in a contact center that maybe spoke French and some Portuguese and obviously English, but they needed to go deeper. And they used Language.io in this case to cover more languages. Again, starting out slow, a handful of languages, and now they're up to 20 different language pairs that's enabled them to be really local in their support coverage. One thing to keep in mind too, it's not just as we in the West think of English as a source, right? These language pairs include French-speaking agents, Portuguese-speaking agents supporting Swahili and other African languages directly from a contact center, not in Africa or in Africa. They could support it from wherever.
Great. And I'm going to tell our audience a little bit more. So this is a lot of the content that Ted just covered. But, Showmax had recently partnered with HBO and Comcast, and they were bringing African content and scripted shows to the market, and also some sports and other streaming. So that was what they were trying to achieve. Africa is a fascinating market. As a marketer, I just find it really unique, but it is a very young continent in all of the countries. So the median age in Africa is 19.7 years, which is the youngest of any continent. And Gen Z does tend to spend a lot of time on streaming services. As the mother to a Gen Zer, I can appreciate that, but also I don't understand why he has on the subtitles, but that's okay, it works for me. And then the urban centers in Africa continue to grow. So they felt it was a great market for them, but they wanted to feel like a local brand. But before we move any further, if Africa is the youngest continent and some of the youngest countries, the oldest median age is Monaco, I guess because you have to have accumulated a certain amount of wealth to afford to live there. But that's our little fun fact for today, 53.1 years old. And Ted, I think we did this slide when they were first starting, and this is kind of how they started thinking about is which were the largest language populations that they wanted to go after. And they certainly have expanded their footprint.
Yeah, they're about 20 plus language pairs now. I checked earlier. So 20 plus language pairs covering that market.
That's amazing. And so one of the things that they actually were able to achieve is that Showmax now has overtaken Netflix in their category, and they gained 6 points of market share. So whenever somebody says language and CX and all of that don't really matter, I mean, 6 points of market share is really a phenomenal achievement. And they were able to raise it to 2 million subscribers. So congratulations to our friends at Sky. But it really is important, especially when you're engaging with new markets, to make sure it feels comfortable and accessible, and language can do a lot of that heavy lifting for a brand. Anything else that you would want to add to this story, Ted?
I also watch my streaming with subtitles, Sheridan, even though I'm not Gen Z.
That's because you're cool and hip. I am not.
No, it's because my hearing is going.
Oh, I was going to say, I don't do it ironically. I do it because I need it. But, you know, we talked a little bit about knowing those language pairs. And this is even when you know that you may go into a different country or different continent, starting to think about which language pairs will give you the most impact is really an important part of the process. And being really clear about your goals. In this case, they wanted to take share from Netflix and they knew how to do it. And so really understanding those goals is going to be important. All right, so now we have built satisfaction with our existing customers. We've identified new markets and what we need to go into those. This one is really interesting, is you can also leverage AI, language IO, translation to actually increase efficiency and really catapult cost savings. So what some of the things that we see, obviously you all know this in your day-to-day work, reduction of call times, wait times go down, improved first call resolution because the communication is much more fluid. And we talked a little bit before about that lack of trust when you get answers in your non-native language. You don't know if maybe you misheard. So there is a piece of that. And then agents are increasingly satisfied because there can be nothing more frustrating than trying to help someone and you just can't understand them. So let's talk about a famous travel brand and what they did, Ted.
Yes, so large global travel booking brand, you know, as you might imagine, right, the volume of support, the size of contact centers needed to offer support and provide support across the globe in a two-tier market, right? Just like with Shutterstock, both with property owners and with travelers. So the need was there. The need was being filled with human agents assigned in each market, with the added complexity of the cyclical nature of, you know, needing to flex resources, right? Expand for peak travel times and reduce for the lulls during the course of the year. A lot of expense, a lot of time consumed there. So using an AI solution like Language IO and allowing for the focus of multilingual support to be placed anywhere in the globe for any language allowed them to reduce their contact center footprint, allowed them to reduce the agents and the operating hours, and as I mentioned earlier in the discussion here, actually drove up an increase in NPS scores because they were able to more easily divert complex support cases to a subject matter expert, regardless of the language that they were speaking. In often cases, it would be in an offshore environment. So they're reducing costs, they're improving the speed to problem resolution, and they're increasing deflection rates. So it goes to show, again, as we've been talking, that the ability to handle multilingual support for your customers, no matter where they sit, can really drive improvements in cost savings and staffing.
Such a good point. And when we did our survey at the beginning, one of the things that you all said was the biggest challenge is just staff for some of the other skills versus just language. And you can really do that because now all of a sudden, all of your support agents, anybody handling case, subject matter experts speak 155 languages. And if you're starting to think about where you could, you know, accrue some of those cost savings or starting to think about modeling your own data, we do have a calculator on our website. We'll make sure you get that. Feel free to go in and play with that. And if you want to have another discussion, we certainly can help you think about your specific ROI and how you might gain some of that from working with us. Anything you'd like to add, Brian, on
Yeah, sure. So another fascinating case study here. I think one thing I would bring up, I mentioned a few slides ago that of the organizations focusing on efficiency, about half are focusing on responsible growth. Well, that naturally means that the other half are focused on more traditional slashing and cost savings. And this definitely speaks to them. But another thing I really want to hit on is really echoing a point that both of you have made, which is that, again, as we get to this era, this AI for simple issues, agents for complex ones era, what we're ultimately communicating to the customer is that if you by the when you to a live person, that live person is an expert. There's someone who really knows the ins and outs of the product, knows the ins and outs of the support process, can really be a true support advocate for you. What that means is that you cannot have someone who just like takes a message and passes it along to a supervisor who gets back to you in 48 hours. The customer is very much expecting that anyone they speak to at any time of day is going to be able to meaningfully provide support and answer their questions. So from a scalability point, that creates a huge challenge, right? You always pretty much have to have a high quality, empathetic, knowledgeable support agent available to all customers at all times. Well, that's very expensive. That's very hard to plan for. That's very resource intensive. And so they also have to speak 18 different languages to that makes it almost impossible for the typical organization to do in an era of efficiency pressure. And so to what both of you are saying, if we now can say, okay, we always have a great agent available, and let us use tools, let us use our solutions to make that great agent also multilingual, then you're kind of getting the best of both worlds. You're managing your staff responsibly, you're keeping an eye on efficiency and cost, but you're giving customers access to that true expert who can understand them, connect with them, and support them. You really have a great experience that you're building.
I love that. And so let us know if you want to play with your data and start to think about how you could model this. We often talk about this is the Rubik's Cube problem. If many of you are dealing with scheduling, you have to have your follow the sun model in all of the languages and make sure that you are staffed for any incident. So this kind of takes some of that pressure off of you. So let's talk about making sure you build that organization for scale and flexibility. So you've got great customer satisfaction, you've expanded to new markets, and you've also started thinking about where you can take some cost out of your business. But now you're going to architect for flexibility. I love this Harvard Business Review study is that we found that turnover for multilingual support agents is around 45%, which is not wildly different from what we see for non-multilingual agents. And we know how much effort we spend to train and recruit them, but it actually is harder because now you need somebody with all of the soft skills that you have and the knowledge, but that also can speak French. And not only do they speak French, they speak Quebecois, so they can support Quebec. So it's really something you need to think about is how you scale and build that flexibility into your system. So we have another amazing case study for you on some of the critical considerations. But before we go into that, context and making sure that answers are business accurate is really important as we're building your system. So for instance, this is my Apple Pencil isn't working and I can't figure out please help me. So we have an abbreviation. We have a typo because we've got my phone is kerned together. And then we have personal information that we probably don't want to go out on the web. So what we need to do to make sure that answer is business accurate is not translate Apple Pencil because you don't want something to do with a fruit on this discussion. And we also have to kind of make sure we understand that PLS is please, and then my phone is my phone. So not only do we typically optimize content before it gets translated, is making sure we are speaking like your brand, using your brand and product terms, and also masking any private information so that it can feel like a response that's native to you. We have in some cases, and French is my favorite one because we have a very large French company that is a customer, and they tested our solution and they said it actually came back as native. They had native speakers that couldn't tell they were engaging with AI. So that accuracy is really important. And one of the things that you're going to need as you're building your plan for scale is a glossary. What are your product terms? What would you ever want translated? What would you not want translated? And like your knowledge base, this is going to be a blueprint for your success as you're building your program. Ted, anything that I missed on this?
Well, I think you mentioned it in passing. The masking of the PII, right, is critically important in any industry, right? You don't want that content to be exposed either by an AI that's sucking up data to train, right, or being stored somewhere in a cloud and you don't know where it is and who has access to it. So it is important that any PII is identified and redacted, masked, encrypted to ensure that it's not inappropriately accessed.
I love that. So business accuracy is really important because you want it to sound human, even if they're engaging with chat, case, email, etc. So let's talk about our global software company. And this statistic is horrifying to me, is that 1 in 4 employees are out there putting your customers' private data into AI engines. And this is one of those things when I talked about early on, is that you want to understand what your agents are doing today to solve this problem. Because if they're reading something and they don't know what it says and they put it in Google Translate, that could be somebody's passport number. It could be their credit card number. It could be all sorts of things. So Ted, tell me about keeping data safe in this global software company.
Yeah, no, it's really important. It's critical. This case study is super interesting and not so unique in terms of what their challenge is, right? This software company focuses on the travel sector. So they're handling a lot of personal information. You mentioned passport numbers. It could be credit card numbers, even just your email address and phone number, like you showed in the last slide. And what they realize is somebody in leadership realized, we have these different channels set up for translation, and there's security that's built in there. But what about the rest of the organization? An employee in finance or an employee in a support function role that gets an email that's in a different language. They need to understand what it is. What's the default process for that? I think just as a consumer, right? The default process is you go to Google Translate, you copy and paste, and you get the translation. And they realize that from a business organization standpoint, this is a huge risk, right? That you don't know what type of information, what type of content is being exposed and could be potentially sucked up into the AI, right? For training or whatever. And it's a risk that they don't want to that they need to mitigate. So they came to us and said, hey, you're handling our translation in a very secure way in the support channels. Do you have an alternative for this for this type of scenario? An alternative for Google Translate or DeepL or one of these other ones that's publicly available? And the answer is yes. So we have a browser plugin that can as an extension to any Chrome-based browser. And it functions in a very similar way from a user interface as Google Translate, but it has the underlying zero trace secure process that is in place with the standard support channels in your CRMs. So it follows zero trace. It's ISO, SOC 2, HIPAA compliant, and it masks and doesn't retain any data for training purposes or anything else. And this then satisfied them enough that they actually blocked the Google Translate URL from within their domain. So now the employees are directed to our tool if they need to do a translation, an ad hoc translation of their desktop, without the risk of exposing PII or confidential information or proprietary information.
That's amazing. So as you think about your language translation strategy, it doesn't always have to be in the CX organization. Some of the solutions that you may be implementing will be really valuable to the rest of your company. So
I think the other thing to mention too, because this relates back to that previous slide, Sheridan, where you mentioned about accuracy, business accuracy. The other benefit here is when you go to a Google Translate or a DeepL or whatever, you're getting a generically trained engine. Right now, they're very powerful. They have billions at this point, billions and billions of words as corpus, and so they can be, fairly accurate in a generic sense, but they're not taking into consideration your brand, your domain that you're in, and the Apple one is a sort of a basic example, right? But like when you want your branding, your products, let's say, or your services that are branded to be translated or not translated, you need that to be handled in a consistent and accurate way. And by using our technology within that example I gave you, it not only has the secure component, but it also has that same glossary, programmable glossary that you can put in to really customize and make it consistent and accurate for those terms that you that are critical for your business.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to move a little more rapidly as we kind of go through, because we have a few other things that we want to share with you. But one of the big things we want to talk about is how do you make sure that you're protecting your customers and their data from AI. So let's talk really quickly about mobile payments and what you can learn from this company, Ted.
So yeah, this is directly related, right? Just different channels, but that same layer of security, zero trace, ISO and SOC 2 compliance in terms of masking data and not retaining any data. Critically important for any kind of application where money is being transacted and discussed, right? And so for this mobile payments company, their customers are on a mobile device. They're transferring typically small value money cross-border, and they need to ensure that any communication around that money transfer is secure, right? They need to ask questions about where their money is, when it's going to be available to them, confirming values, et cetera. They want to make sure that that is secure, and that's where a technology like Language.io can really shine and give that assurance that that any communication is going to be protected, it's going to be safe, and it's going to be reliable.
Yeah, this company does massive marketing campaigns all over the globe, and so they probably spend millions and millions of dollars to attract new customers. But one data breach could undermine all of that, because 83% of consumers say, hey, you've not been careful with my data. I can't trust you with anything else. So it's really important as you're thinking about financial transactions, and we'll give you some questions to ask vendors. This case study is really important, I think, because not only sometimes do you have somebody's data and personal information you're trying to protect, or their financial transactions, but in this case, it could be literally someone's life. So can we talk a little bit about Rainbow Railroad, Ted?
Yes. So Rainbow Railroad is a global nonprofit that helps at-risk LGBTQI plus people escape situations that are dangerous, right? Often state-sponsored persecution, needing to get out of a situation that is really life or death in some cases. And originally they've been, covering the languages they could, English and Spanish, and needed to expand rapidly as they saw an increase in the need for their service. And so they came to us for allowing them to expand beyond those core languages quickly and rapidly. And this slide's actually outdated at this point. We're now at 10 plus language pairs for Rainbow Railroad, and they've been working with us now for a number of years. But it's a really important mission that they have, and we're really honored to be a part of that, and help this organization help their people get to where they need to be and safely.
Thank you so much. I hate to cut this one short because it's so important. But as you're thinking about architecting your experience and leveraging AI, and this is not just a language translation AI thing that you need to think about, your data and your customers need to be protected. And you certainly don't want, as Ted said, that data or anything that somebody puts in to be sucked up into a model and ultimately regurgitated in a way that you don't expect. So here are some questions that you should ask all vendors about security in your data. We do have a one-pager that we will include if you ever are evaluating vendors. It's so great. But certainly what they're doing with your data, how they're retaining is going to be really important. And then how do they make sure that you're aware of any sort of data breach? But let me know if you need this, because I really found it to be a valuable resource. And one of the cool things is not only is security an important part of AI, but ethics are important as you're thinking about training them. And our CEO, Heather Shoemaker, if you ever get a chance to hear her speak about AI, she's really amazing and one of the foremost thought leaders in this space. But she recently was in Fortune magazine talking about making sure that gender bias was not being reflected in AI. And our RED team, which is a team that tests for those things, really takes an active interest in making sure that we're treating all humans with respect and as we're architecting our systems. So Brian, anything you would add to any of those about data security before we kind of wrap it up and give our audience a chance to ask us questions?
Well, yeah, just that, as I think many people know, this isn't just like a vendor-driven part of the conversation. It's what we're hearing from the actual community, that the overwhelming majority of people cite, overwhelming majority of contact center leaders, in fact, cite data security challenges as one of the major inhibitors to personal connections and one of the major roadblocks for AI investments. So as you go into 2025, a year where 90% of contact centers say they need to identify results-oriented AI use cases, and 95% say that customers are demanding more personalized and predictive experiences, two things: you cannot let data stand in the way. You cannot be concerned that you can't connect with the customer because you can't manage data about them, that you can't have a safe, ethical, transparent, secure conversation that leverages AI. You need to be able to have safeguards in place. You need to be able to approach things with an ethical mindset. Your employees need to feel protected. Your customers need to feel protected. And working with a platform that enables that to happen is really the key to ensuring that the rise of technology does not mean a loss of humanity.
That's such a good point. And I don't know if many of you remember the early aughts in 2000s or Y2K. One of my favorite books was Good to Great by Jim Collins. If you haven't read that book, definitely go read it. It's probably a little dated now. It's probably worth an update. But one of the things that he talks extensively about is technology as a differentiator. And his premise of the book is to take two companies in very, very similar industries, almost identical, and see what made one become a great company and one just was a good company. And that adoption of technology is a really important part of it. And I think AI is going to revolutionize really our customer experience in ways that we can't even fathom right now. So what can you do today with those big things ahead of you and lots of opportunity is really focus on your business objectives, know what you're trying to achieve. And you can do a hybrid of all three of these use cases that we talked about, but really knowing what's the most important for you is going to help you architect a plan that is going to be most successful. Data is your friend. The more data that you can get about your customers, what language they speak, sometimes they actually will change languages in a conversation. So if it starts out easy, they can manage that conversation. If it gets more technical, they may need to revert to their native language. So you need something that can switch with them. So really understanding the types of cases you have and where your biggest opportunities are. And then start to build your plan and think about, like, what do you want to achieve? And it's like a roadmap. It's not all going to be done at one time, but where can you make differences today? And experimentation is really a key. One of our customers, actually, as we talked a little bit, you could start with a couple of different languages. You could start with maybe some product lines or certain pockets of your customer support team. Ted, we have our favorite use case about somebody using testing us with their worst performing agents, because we actually optimize a lot of the conversation. And Ted, you want to say a little bit more about that before we go to questions? So be typing your questions while Ted gives you the
It's interesting, right? We do get customers that do different things in terms of their experimenting. But one customer in particular said, "Look, we're gonna only deploy this at first to our lowest performing agents based on, their metrics, right? Time to close and et cetera." And they did find an improvement. They found an improvement in turnaround time on responses, on the shortened time frame to close the ticket, right? Higher customer satisfaction. So much so that then the question becomes, for some of this AI enabled technology that we have for the text normalization, right? Fixing typos and understanding slang. You know, can you do this in a monolingual setting? Can you do this in English only, for example, right? Can we apply some of that AI technology to our English speakers speaking with English customers? And it's a real challenge, right? I think that we're all human and we're fallible, so we need the technology to help us sometimes in getting the message across in a more succinct, efficient, and accurate manner.
Wonderful. And I think we have some questions from our friends. So I did say we are going to share the slides with you, and we'll share some of the content we talked about. And my book is Good to Great by Jim Collins, and I certainly will put that into the chat. So our friend Mark, when using Language IO to translate, how local does the language sound to the customer? We find the challenges in ensuring the customer understands what's being said to them and cannot tell that the customer lives locally. We have done several experiments. I'll let Ted answer this in depth, where even in the case I used in France, they thought it was a native speaker engaging with them. But Ted, anything that you'd add to that?
Well, I think part of it has to do with the setup, right? There's the high quality output of the underlying machine translation, where the technology, and not to get too into the weeds, but the technology will intelligently select the right translation engine to handle that particular language pair that's being served up. So you have the right engine for the language pair, but also the setup that involves populating that with your setup with glossaries, right? I mentioned that terminology for your brand, for your business, and for your domain, the domain that you're operating in, will ensure that you have a more consistent approach to translation, a more fluid language coming across that will be better understood by your customers. We have the option to turn on a disclaimer that says, this chat is being handled by AI, or this chat is being handled by a translation tool. You can customize it. I would tell you, most customers do not turn that on because exactly what you asked. Their goal is, and what they achieve is to have a communication between customer and agent that is seamless and not obvious that it's a translation.
The other thing is, as we're going, your agents are giving us feedback on the quality of the translations, and we continue to learn and get better and better. So that makes the difference too. Ryan, I love your question too. The knowledge base. If you start with the knowledge base, Ted, and you're using machine translation only, lots of times there's schematics, et cetera, other images in these knowledge articles. How do we handle those today?
Yeah. So first of all, because there was another question that came in on the other channel that had that's asked about knowledge base. Can knowledge base be machine translation only? I think it was something like that. And so the way that we recommend for the handling of knowledge base, again, as a starting point, as a base for providing multilingual support, knowledge base content is static. I mean, it's dynamic. It's going to continue to get updated, but compared to a chat or an email chain, it's longer shelf life. It's meant to be published on the website. You want that to be the highest quality possible. And because it's serving as a base for what you might do in the future, again, with bots or whatever, you want to make sure that it's a high quality. So we would recommend, and most customers do this, is machine translation followed by a human linguist post edit. So that output will then be edited to make sure that it's 100% accurate. As far as images in the knowledge base go, there are different things that you can do, and images sort of fall within a spectrum, right? If the image contains text that's editable, certainly it could be translated through that process. If an image is something of a UI, let's say a help desk, a help article that's talking about a software product, a lot of the images in there will be of a UI and how to click through different menus, et cetera. You'd have to take screenshots of those UI elements, right? You wouldn't localize them if the UI itself is not localized. So you have to kind of keep that in mind. So it depends, right? We would recommend localizing as much as possible, but it also depends on what that base image is and what it's referring to, and is it appropriate to have that translated.
Well, I think we're at the top of the hour. It's been so much fun having this conversation with you, Brian, and certainly Ted. Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to hearing more. If you have any questions, feedback, feel free to send us an email. We'll happily answer. I know Brian does quite a few of these. You wouldn't want to miss a Brian webinar or masterclass. And we'd love to connect with you, and let me know if you need any information from what we've already talked about. And have a wonderful day, and thank you for spending this time with us. And don't forget to get your certificate. So I'll quit talking so you could get it.
Yep.
Brian,
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Sheridan.
Brian,
Thanks,
Brian.
for Ted, Language IO team. And yeah, like Sheridan said, as we go off the air here, your ability to download the certificate, as well as your ability to sign up for a more personalized follow-up or demo, should both pop up. Reach out to us at CCW Digital immediately after if you have any questions. We'll be happy to help. Otherwise, follow the blueprint here and really position yourself to expand intelligently, expand in a human way, and expand for success. Thanks so much to all of you for your commitment to a better customer experience.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Bye.